Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on an early Saturday morning. Today is August 14, which is recognized as International Comfort Women Memorial Day. Today marks the 30th anniversary of when Kim Hak-sun became the first Comfort Woman survivor to testify willingly and in public. I'll come back later for the discussion portion of the event, but some things I'd like to mention is that first, the online archive hosted by UCLA Center for Korean Studies at international.ucla.edu/cks/care is still in progress, but the sample of it is available now, and you can see what we'll bring to you in the next few months. Second, I'd like to thank our community co-sponsors. Okay, so we are still seeing a screenshot of or the sample page of the online archive we are building, and you can also see the primary sources, and we will have dozens more primary sources onto this website, along with some lesson plans and teachers' materials. Second, I'd like to thank our community co-sponsors. These 10 organizations have been working with us on various local projects on the comfort women issue, racial justice, and women's rights issue as well. Each one of these groups is doing essential and much needed work in our LA community, especially in these uncertain times. There are Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress, YWCA, Glendale and Pasadena, Progressive Asia Network for Action, Pacific Asia Nuclear Free Peace Alliance, Center for the Pacific Asian Family, Thai Community Development Center, Filipino Worker Center for Southern California, Korean American Coalition of Los Angeles, Korean American Family Services, Peace Over Violence. And before I turn the event over to our program director, Stephanie, I'd like to share this message from Lee Yong-soo 할머니. As many of you know, we've been working with Lee Yong-soo 할머니 on her final campaign, which is for comfort women issue to be heard by the UN International Court of Justice. She vowed to pursue justice until the end, and we will do everything to support this mission.
미국에 계시는 덕후 여러분 반갑습니다. 여성 인권 운동가 이용수입니다. 오늘 위안부 행동에서 위안부 기념일 행사를 한다고 들었습니다. 위안부 행동을 비롯해서 마이크 혼다 의원님, 샌프란시스코의 판사님들, 선생님들, 학생들이 정말 많은 예를 써 주셔서 우리 문제가 많이 알려지고 있습니다. 손상도 세워졌습니다. 정말 감사합니다. 근데 여러분, 일본은 아직도요 거짓말하고 있습니다. 하버드 대학 교수를 내세워서 우리가 자발적으로 같다고 뻔뻔하게 역사 왜곡을 하고 있습니다. 이제는 국제사법재판소에 가서 우리가 거짓말인지 일본이 거짓말인지 판단을 받아야 합니다. 이제 시간이 없습니다. 역사의 산 증인 이렇게 시퍼렇게 살아있는데도 일본이 저러니까요. 할머니들이 다 돌아가시고 나면 어떻게 되겠습니까? 미국에서도 올바른 교육을 위해 많은 애를 쓰시고 계신다고 알고 있습니다. 오늘 글짓기 대회에서 참가하신 학생들, 수고해 주신 선생님들 모두 감사드립니다. 부디 건강하시고 제가 코로나만 지나가면 꼭 미국에 가겠습니다. 그때 꼭 만납시다. 감사합니다. 고맙습니다.
Okay, so yes, I think Yong-soo Harmony's personality really came through. Personally feel very encouraged by that message. Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Lee. I volunteer with CARE as a program director. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Last year, we had a video project that focused on the testimony of Kim Hak-sun, who is the first survivor to come forward publicly on a wide scale and willingly, although she was not the first survivor known, first comfort woman survivor known. And so this year we decided to expand on the meaning of testimony and focus on the memoirs of two survivors, Jan Ruff O'Herne from the Netherlands and Maria Rosa Henson from the Philippines. And we asked students to consider some difficult questions about a recurring thread that comfort women have had to face, which is that they're unreliable witnesses, their testimonies are not perfect, and on those grounds, deniers and skeptics have sought to discredit the history in its entirety. This was a challenging subject, and I really want to thank all of the students who submitted because putting your work out there is a risk, and we will definitely try to have more opportunities like this in the future. Ultimately, our 4 guest judges, who I'll introduce in a bit, they selected 2 winners and 2 finalists, and the 2 winners are Sol Choi and Arim Lee, and our 2 finalists are Yong-chi Deng and Dara Kang. We have 3 of these students here with us today, and I'll be playing a video from Yong-chi later. And now I'd like to just briefly introduce 4 of our very generous guest judges, beginning with Tracy Kato Kiriyama, also known as TKK. Tracy is a community organizer and an award-winning artist in multiple disciplines. She has a book coming out later this year called Navigating Without Instruments from Writ Large Press, so please look out for that. And Tracy is a longtime friend to CARE and a true Los Angeles mainstay, so thank you for being part of this project. And next we have Kathleen Collins, who taught for 35 years in primarily social science with the Glendale Unified School District. And she is a recipient of the Teacher of the Year Award. Many of you know that Glendale is where the Peace Monument sits, so it was really great to have Kathleen's participation to maintain consistency with local standards. And next we have Sandra Fahey, who is an associate professor of anthropology at Sophia University in Tokyo. She has been a fellow with the Human Rights Program at Harvard Law School, as well as with USC and with the Institute for the Study of Social Science in Paris. Sandra is also the author of 2 books on human rights abuses in North Korea. One is called Marching Through Suffering, and the second is called Dying for Rights, putting North Korea's rights abuses on the record. And I saw Sandra, as I explained to some of you, speak on a panel with our professor, Alexis Dudden, about witness testimony and oral history, and that discussion was a big reason for having this competition, so thank you both for being here. And last but not least, we have Maki Kimura, who is a lecturer in gender and politics at the University College London, an associate lecturer at the Open University. Maki is the author of this book, which is also going to show up backwards, but the title is Unfolding the Comfort Woman Debates, Modernity, Violence, Women's Voices. And this book deals head on with many of the questions that we asked the students to consider for the essay competition. So thank you to all of the judges. These essays were in the right hands with you. And before I go on, I want to also thank 3 people who are Professor Gina Kim from California State University, Northridge, and to our volunteer Yoonji Hwang. Your help was essential to running this competition. Thank you. And also a shout out to Katrina Magirang, who in the Philippines, who helped translate a clip that you'll see later on. So now I think we're going to move on to the main portion of the event, which is the students. We are going to start with Yong-chi Deng, whose essay was selected as one of the finalists. Her essay is entitled Beyond Words, Interpreting Comfort Women's Testimonies for Justice. And let me just pull up her video right here.
Hi everyone, my name is Yong-chi and I'm a freshly graduated high school student going to university next year. And I'm very honored to be selected as one of the finalists for this essay competition. In this 5-minute little speech that I'm going to give, I'm going to be talking a little bit about why I decided to enter and also reading a few passages from my essay. So the reason I decided to enter, first of all, the way I got to know this contest was actually, I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw this contest in one of the Instagram accounts I follow, the wonders of social media, I know. And the reason why I entered and was really attractive to me was because I've been always really interested in women's rights, interested also in researching about war crimes and human rights violations, but also taking a very nuanced academic approach to human rights violations. So for example, through the perspectives of historical analysis or gender theory, etc. And also the prompt itself was really attractive to me. So how should we consider, interpret, and respond to the testimonies and memoirs of comfort women survivors, particularly when confronted with deniers and skeptics? That kind of stirred a memory within me of when I was watching a documentary a long time ago, which I highlighted in my essay. So I wrote, 3 years ago, I stumbled upon a documentary about the lives of former Chinese comfort women. I had always known about so-called comfort women and the sexual abuse they had endured, albeit in a very singular and sterile way. In contrast, the grandmas I encountered on the silver screen were so alive. This documentary made these grandma stories more accessible and enabled me to empathize with them as human beings. This memory really highlighted for me the role of testimonies in historical records, and also particularly for me in educating the public and in letting members of the public know specific historical issues that may be very complex and have many angles. And I wrote that in the public conscious, my essay was focusing on especially how testimonies and memoir play a very specific and very important role in shaping the public consciousness and also in shaping how ordinary people in society view a historical event. I wrote, testimonies and memoirs are important drivers of public discourse precisely because how human they are. They elicit emotions within the common person in a way that sterile statistics cannot. For example, the short animation Her Story gathered more than 1.5 million views on YouTube, with many leaving heartbroken comments after viewing it. They supplement official records in an emotionally valuable way. Furthermore, sometimes official archival documents do not recount the entire history, nor are they necessarily neutral. The people's historian Howard Zinn wrote in his essay, Secrecy, Archives, and the Public Interest. The existence, preservation, and availability of archives, documents, records in our society are very much determined by the distribution of wealth and power. The most powerful, the richest elements in society have the greatest capacity to find documents, preserve them, and decide what is or is not available to the public. This means government, business, and the military are dominant. So in my essay, I thought it was really important to highlight the role testimonies play in humanizing victims. So for example, humanizing survivors of Japanese military sexual slavery, so that advocacy is based on the human rather than the issue, which can sometimes be really polarizing and divisive, and perhaps also unconstructed and actually disrespectful to the victim. So that's the thing that I focused on, and that's a lot of the reason why I entered this contest, because the prompt enabled me to think about testimonies and think about kind of historical records in general in a way that's completely different, that's very human instead of very sterile, very bookish, very academic. So once again, unfortunately, I'm unable to join everyone on Zoom together in commemoration, but I hope that this event is an opportunity to reflect for everyone. In the end, thank you to all the CARE staff and judges for this event, and I hope that everybody has a nice day. Bye-bye.
It was great to have that message for Long-chi. I think she's on a different time zone as well. So now we're going to move on to live readings from 3 of our students. We're going to start with Dara Kang, whose essay was selected as a finalist and is entitled Who's His or Her Story. Dara, please introduce yourself, share with us a bit of your essay, and let us know why you decided to enter.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Dara, and I'm a finalist in this year's essay competition, and it is an honor to be speaking on such an important day. Firstly, I want to thank the judges who took their time to read all the entries. And I also want to thank all the people who made this competition possible, primarily the CARE staff. And finally, I want to thank all the speakers who are coming in today to answer questions and raise awareness about comfort women. So I first learned about comfort women during the beginning of high school when I was around 13, 14 years old. However, it wasn't until this year that I became more involved and truly understood their stories and the injustice that still continues to this day. For my junior year, I took a world history class, and we were given the whole year to work on our internal assessment. And it's a paper that highlighted disagreement between historians. And I immediately remembered the story my mother had told me years ago that left an impression on me to this day. I decided to read more stories and historical papers about comfort women. And whenever I watched videos or read personal stories, I would always shed tears. However, hearing the pain in the voices and words from these women was only a small fraction of the pain they endured. It was during this period of research that I realized just how complex and challenging of an issue comfort women faced. I felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and sadness. It was incomprehensible to me that these women who suffered at the hands of the Japanese government still hadn't received an apology. Wanting to hear and learn more, I attended the Harvard webinar where various speakers, including Lee Yong-soo Halmoni, in light of the Harvard professor who denied comfort women's stories, expressed their support and shared their knowledge about the plight of comfort women. After registering for the webinar, I saw an email about an essay contest. And now something to know about me is that I'm very shy when it comes to sharing my work. I'm also quite a perfectionist when it comes to writing, and I tend to worry about my work. So I struggled with entering writing competitions in the past. However, after writing my internal assessment, learning so much about comfort women, attending the webinar, as well as watching countless documentaries and reading our Halmoni stories, all those doubts melted away, and I knew that I had to share my thoughts. I will now read a couple lines from my essay that I hope give our Halmoni strength. Every Wednesday, former comfort women as well as supporters line up in front of the Japanese embassy demanding an apology. While many of these Halmonis are older and have a harder time remembering the finer details in documents, their stories must not be ignored. So many of them have stepped forward after remaining in silence for years, keeping their stories from their partners, children, and even themselves. It is appalling that so many people have never heard of comfort women. To educate deniers and skeptics and to prevent the breeding of ignorance, we must share our Halmoni stories to the world. It is the least we can do. Schools should hold units or discussions about the repercussions of war and how the vulnerable are always the first to be harmed. We must mark their lives in history books, memorials, and museums. We must find a way to keep their legacy alive. Their lives should be honored and their words passed down. I noticed that during the course of my education, we always learned about wars, the politics, the bloodshed between soldiers, but we rarely talked about the true victims of war, women and children. Many of my peers have never heard the story of comfort women, and most of them probably never will unless we do something about it. I want younger kids, like my little sister, to be taught their stories when they go to school. I want other people to feel anger about the injustice going on right now. I know that many of the brave women who shared their stories have passed or are older now, but that doesn't mean their story has to leave with them. These women made themselves vulnerable, risking everything to reveal the horrific actions of the Japanese government. It would be selfish of us to forget and let their stories fade away. To the Halmonis today who are still here and fighting, I want to say that I admire your strength and courage. We will continue to support and fight alongside you. Please do not give up hope and never stop fighting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dara. Yeah, I'm really enjoying seeing everyone's reactions, and I hope you're all appreciating the students as well. We're going to move on to Arim Lee, whose essay was selected as a winner. She's actually joining us from South Korea, so she's up very late and really felt strongly about sharing her words with us. So please take it away, Arim.
Okay, hi, thanks so much for the introduction. I'm Arim, and I'm actually going to read a few lines from my essay and then kind of move on to my reason for entering and just like kind of the background behind like how I got to know about the comfort women issue. And like same as Dara, I just really want to thank everyone who worked hard to make both the competition and this like Memorial Day event happen, and everyone who's attending for just choosing to be here and pay attention to this super important issue. I'm gonna read a couple lines from my conclusion. Uh, in conclusion, when we consider the background of the comfort women survivors, we realize that the little details that conflict with facts cannot be avoided entirely and should not detract from the validity of their statements. Inversely, what we take as facts will not always be legitimate truths that we can count on without fail. And even when a testimony is short of statements that can be properly corroborated, we must recall the conditions that these women had to face and the obstacles they suffer even now as people speaking up for themselves in a world that isn't completely ready to embrace them. We must not urge them to present more and more real proof when that is exactly what they have given us, and thank them tremendously instead. Whatever shortcomings the survivors' memoirs have should not prompt the public to label them as frauds or liars when they are being so fiercely vulnerable with their wounds. And for this reason, above all else, we should listen, not interrupt, not demand to see the scars on their bodies, not wave them off, not zero in on their minuscule mistakes and peck stubbornly at them, not clap at some parts and scoff at others. The way in which we should respond to the testimonies of the women is to listen to the vast wide story, the tiny details dotted throughout, and everything in between, to everything that they could possibly have to say. So I wrote this essay for the 2021 CARE essay competition, and for me, I honestly can't really determine the exact moment that I learned about the comfort women issue, or like, kind of decided to really get involved with it, because just growing up as a girl in South Korea, I was like fortunate enough to be like taught about and just immersed in this topic starting from a very young age. And I, constantly heard about these stories, and at school we were given like lessons about them. And although I didn't really gain the initiative to like actually begin researching and just looking for ways to really help until recently, I think that just like knowing that from an early age, I couldn't really fully grasp the extent to which these crimes were committed. But I did know very well that they had been atrocious, inhumane, and just downright brutal. So this year, while just delving deeper into issues of sexual assault and sexism all around the globe, I recalled the comfort women's stories, and I soon discovered CARE, where I learned about the essay competition. And yes, to be honest, 2,000 words felt like a lot, especially because I wanted to approach the topic with gravity and reach conclusions that I felt did actual justice to the people involved in the issue. However, I felt that I knew the basic, like general outline and timeline of what had happened surrounding this topic, but I hadn't had proper experience, like actually thinking critically and carefully about the issue, which kind of led to me participating. And I also just wanted to read more accounts of the survivors and form my own opinions and thoughts on the topic, which, as was stated earlier, just asked how we should kind of consider and respond to the testimonies of the survivors. And yeah, I'm very thankful and glad that I was able to kind of achieve this through the process of writing my essay. And I'm very happy to be able to share it with everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Autumn. I think you achieved exactly what you set out to do. And thank you for sharing your essay with us. And we are going to close it out with Sol Choi, whose essay was also selected as a winner. So Sol, please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hello, my name is Sol Choi, and I'm now senior at University High School in Irvine, California. I'm so honored to be able to participate in this meaningful webinar. And I'm also so grateful to be chosen as a winner of this year's essay competition in the high school division. My involvement with CARE actually began in my 8th grade. And this is when I began a simple National History Day topic on the Comfort Women statue and the grassroots Comfort Women movement based in Glendale. And since then, my participation in CARE activities, from translating educational materials for California high school history teachers to compiling the 814 video project with Stephanie based on Kim Hak-sun's Harbinger testimony, it has really been a mainstay in my life for the past 4 years. And so when I heard about this essay contest on his, her story, I kind of knew I had to participate. And initially, I actually had a really hard time with the prompt because it was such a multifaceted and complex topic on how we engage and interact with the testimonies of the comfort women. So I actually had to rack my brain around for 2 weeks, kind of like trying to figure out how to approach this essay topic. But then once I read the memoirs of the comfort women, as well as amazing papers by Dr. Kimura, who's here, as well as other scholars, I began to be inspired to write my own essay. And this was primarily because I was reminded on a daily basis of the continuing problem with historical revisionism and the sanitization of Japanese imperial history, especially pertaining to the comfort women who are largely unknown survivors of wartime sexual violence. And like not a single textbook at my middle or high school mentioned the comfort women system. And most just largely glossed over human rights violations in the Pacific Theater during World War II. And most of my friends don't know about the comfort women system, and the few people who are familiar about it regard it as kind of a nationalistic issue between Korea and Japan, rather than regarding it as kind of a universal human rights issue. And I've seen the testimonies of the comfort women be criticized by right-wing nationalist revisionists, as well as Harvard Law School professors like Ramsayer, and skeptics who kind of support a supposedly fact-based historical research methodology. And I've seen how the voices of the comfort women are continually ignored and misconstrued. And it wasn't until actually my junior year of high school when my AP World teacher finally mentioned the comfort women system, and we read Kim Hak-sun's testimony during class. And I think it was then that I kind of truly realized how important the testimonies were, because everyone in my class that day would know about the comfort women system, and they kept that part of history in mind from that day on. And I kind of felt validated at that moment, like a part of my history was also represented as well. And I'll just move on to reading some excerpts from my essay. So I stated, quote, "Spreading the comfort women's testimonies allows us to celebrate their persistent efforts to resist, protest, demand justice, and reveal their painful stories in the face of overwhelming social opposition. We should constantly question the systems of oppression that designate officiality, challenge the objectivity of a male-dominated historical tradition, and construe meaning from the subjective voices of a diverse collection of comfort women. And when considering, interpreting, and responding to the oral histories of the comfort women, our central focus should be respecting the agency and the voices of the comfort women. Their voices should inspire us to take action for sincere apology, redress, as well as continued education outreach on behalf of the comfort women." And I feel like throughout this competition, I've kind of learned a lot about oral history and how subjectivities and the experiences of comfort women should be celebrated as strengths and not liabilities. I've kind of also learned how, quote unquote, official sources reflect unequal power dynamics and they're not really based on a measure of added credibility. I've also found out how we can engage with the testimonies in a respectful way where collective meaning is also derived, but also survivors' individual experiences are also kept alive. And I think this contest just allowed me to learn as kind of a young scholar on how to actively engage with the comfort women and kind of keep their history alive. And I'd like to thank everyone for this wonderful opportunity. So I'd like to thank like Stephanie, Phyllis, as well as all the volunteers and judges for this competition. And most importantly, I kind of want to thank the comfort women themselves for their courage and their tenacity in sharing their past histories and inspiring young people like me to carry on their fight. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sol. Thank you to all the students who entered and to our 3 students and to Yong-chi.
If some of the judges can share their thoughts, it'll be great, and it'll be helpful for the students as well.
Can I jump in? Because I didn't have opportunity to share my thought earlier. So when I was really impressed that obviously with even with a prompt that all the essays are so different, and I really could see everyone's voices and how, how everyone like trying to approach this issue through their own interest. And also I could also see, the evidence of really good research have done. So I really congratulate everyone who, who entered and also like came to the finalists and also won the competition to put such an effort to write these essays and did individual research and independent research by yourself. So congratulations.
So now before we move into the second half of the event, I'm just going to play a brief remembrance of two survivors whose memoirs the students read. And these are Jan Ruff O'Herne, who was a Dutch national living in Indonesia when Japanese forces arrived. Her daughter, Carol Ruff, very kindly shared these family photos with us. Really tried to, I think you'll see through these photos just the fullness of her life, not just as a survivor and a victim, but as a mother, as a sister, just her humanity coming through. And then the second part will be for Maria Rosa Henson from the Philippines, who was actually a resistance fighter against the Japanese forces when she was captured. So that part will have a brief video clip just so you're not startled by the audio. And then after that, I think I'll just let it play in silence. And if people want, we can go back and look at any particular photo and discuss it more. Hold on just a second.
Ayaw aminin ng Hapon ang kanyang kasalanan pag tinanggap namin yun. Nagtatago siya sa anino ng kanyang mamamayan.
Jumping in, Stephanie?
Yes, please.
2000, not
sorry.
not who cares about dates, but I am crying because I was standing very close to this photograph when it was taken. And the impact of these women on that day, standing in the middle of Tokyo because there were hate trucks blaring that these women were liars. And I'm getting like, I'm about to cry, but I can hear the hate because they were circling the women, calling them liars. There were people shouting, go home, you're just in it for the money. But as each of the students has bravely said, these women came forward. And there were, Julie Tang has just asked what countries were represented. I'm trying to remember the number, please forgive me. China, both Koreas, Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia. It was my first experience to meet so many survivors. And I'll shut up now, but this photograph is real and it's living history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dudden. And I think there was a question about which countries are represented. The survivor on the leftmost is from Taiwan. The two ladies in white hanbok are from South Korea. There was also a survivor from North Korea who testified as well. And there's a very famous photograph of her embracing Kim Hak-sun, who was obviously the first survivor to come forward. In the middle is Wan Aihua from China. And then towards the right are Maria Rosa Henson and Jan Ruff O'Herne. And at the very right is Inday Saijor, who was a coordinator of the Women's Tribunal from the Philippines. It's just great to see these moments in history when people have stepped up and told their stories at great personal risk.
What's important about this photo is you need to think for the students historically and politically in the contemporary manner. Why do the Japanese only focus on the Korean victims when the victims were throughout the Asia Pacific? There were Western women, there were Indonesian women. Wherever they went, there were the Andaman Islands, Ambon, East Timor. So the face of the comfort women were women. There were French women in Vietnam that became enslaved and then were murdered. The diversity of the issue is astonishing, and the focus of Japan only on Korea is astonishing. And the third is astonishing that the French and the Australians and other countries do not speak up for the women in their country. And it seems to be only the government of Korea that seems to care. And that's an interesting political issue. And then maybe the other is, until very recently, that it's which the students don't understand. You didn't even say the word rape. You didn't talk about it. You didn't even talk about it clinically. It just wasn't discussed. It wasn't brought up in polite company. So the moment has come. One example is there was a very famous massacre in February 1942 where there were a bunch of Australian nurses were shipwrecked, and the Japanese found them. There were 22 nurses. They didn't know what to make of these women in military uniforms and Red Cross armbands. And so, thinking ahead, they raped them, and then they lined them up in the ocean and machine gunned them. One survived. Well, the survivor who survived survived the war, and when she went to the War Crimes Tribunal and wrote out that they had all been raped, the men didn't want to hear it and didn't want to include it in the testimony, and did not include it in the testimony. And it was erased from the history until toward the end of her life, she was interviewed and by a woman historian and finally said, "This is what I wrote. This is what I said." So men don't want to hear it.
There's so much more to be said on that topic. I mean, not only is the issue politicized between Japan and South Korea, but it's also characterized as a message of antagonism toward individual Japanese citizens, and that's very much not the case. This issue would not have come to the forefront without many Japanese historians, researchers, and citizens who felt very strongly. And actually, there was a question about the wreath that Jan Ruff O'Herne is carrying. That was a wreath, I think it's called For the Grave of the Fallen Soldier in Japan. And she felt very strongly about visiting the memorial and laying a wreath on his grave. And there's a section from the documentary that's based on the memoir where Japanese soldiers, former veterans, come up to her and apologize. And it's really quite moving.
And if I could just say one quick thing to compound all the excellent remarks and questions in the chat and comments. This picture is taken in Tokyo, right? And so we need to think about the situationality of where this issue, because as Stephanie has just rightly said, this is not anti-Japanese. This is, for reasons really we can't answer, is the core issue that seems to be tearing Japanese society into its division point. And so the fact that this tribunal is in downtown Tokyo is something that matters historically.